The plaque she polished every morning carried the hotel's motto in 4 languages. And this morning the Arabic was wrong. 2 letters inverted, a meaning turned from dignity to farce, and Amamira was the only one in the lobby who noticed. She paused, cloth locked mid-gleam. Heart ticked once. The gold caught her face and threw it back at her with the distortions of wealth. Oval, stretched, obedient. She pressed the edge of the microfiber into the flourish of the last word and, with the sort of stillness that looks like nothing, wiped until the stencil bled and the air softened. The letters wouldn't write themselves, but their arrogance would gleam less. That would do for now. Behind her, the 7-star orchestra tuned for spectacle. A pair of doormen rehearsed the choreography of deference. An assistant manager aligned fountain lilies with a laser. A concierge recited "Welcome, Excellency" in 3 syllables as if it were a single jewel. The lobby spread out like a hand stacked with rings. Marble the color of old milk, brass facings curved as smiles, a chandelier arranged to suggest constellations for people who had never learned the sky. "Collins," the manager said, and her name became an instruction. Mr. Voss wore his jacket like a decision and his jaw like a complaint. "You're in the frame again." "Sir?" she asked without looking up. She had learned to sand the corners off words until they couldn't cut her. He gestured toward the camera crew craning for angles in the vestibule. "Her Highness's media team are here in advance. Step away from reflective surfaces when they're shooting. We need shine, not staff." "Understood," she said, stepping aside. She knew where to stand to be seen just enough to be moved, never enough to be asked why she was there at all. At the reception desk, Yara, the receptionist, was practicing her smile on the screen's mirror function. She waved a lacquered hand. "Mira," she trilled, shaving 2 syllables off Amamira's name as if they were fat. "Make sure the Arabic greeting cards go to the suites that booked the Arabic amenity, the ones with saffron dates." She lowered her voice the way people do when speaking about either money or God. "The Sheikh's entourage will check them." "The greeting cards are in modern standard Arabic," Amamira said. "The Sheikh's family is Hadrami. The idiom's different." Yara blinked the way a person blinks when you pull the rug off the floor they believed in. "Arabic is Arabic," she said, recovering into her role. "We had them done professionally." "Yes," Mr. Voss chimed in, approach silent, ears always where compliments might be. "By the same agency that did the palace last quarter." He smiled past Amamira at Yara, the compliment's intended recipient. "You have nothing to worry about." "I'm not worried," Yara said, tilting her head so her earring caught a chandelier star. "Mira is." "Collins," Mr. Voss said again, shorter, "silverware in the signature hall. Align the dessert forks with the cut crystal water glasses, center of stem." He made a small pinched gesture as if aligning atoms. "Yes, sir," she said, and left them to their mirrors. The signature hall was a cathedral for appetites, 24-foot ceilings, a carpet patterned like a well-behaved ocean, long tables with enough glass to make a diamond nervous. She moved through it with the reverence of someone trained to leave rooms better than she'd found them. Forks breathed into symmetry under her fingers, cloth smoothed, shadows obeyed. A junior server with trembling wrists trailed her with a tray, as if steadiness were contagious. "Do you think he will notice us?" the boy whispered. "The Sheikh?" "Guests notice different things," she replied. "Some see the chandelier. Some see the fingerprints on the door." "And you?" he asked, curious enough to forget he was afraid. "I listen," she said. "It's the only part that doesn't reflect poorly on you." He frowned at the cleverness, then smiled when he caught it, then flushed because he had enjoyed it. From the hall's far end, the executive pastry chef wheeled in a trolley burdened with sugar sculptures, a falcon mid-turn, a palm tree that believed in its own height. When he saw Amamira, he clicked his tongue. "No handprints," he warned the air. "If I see one, I will cut it off and plate it." "Chef," she said in greeting. He leaned in. "Conspirator." "We left the rose water out of the basbousa. Our guest of honor despises it." He tapped his temple. "Research." "The family recipe uses cardamom and orange blossom," she said, more to the pastry than to him. He tilted his head. "You sound sure." She shrugged, the smallest of oceans. "Some people are predictable." Then pray the desserts are people, he said, and wheeled on. The whisper of radio crackled at her hip as housekeeping called and answered. The timetable telescoped. Arrival now in 40 minutes, then 35. Outside, a convoy rehearsed the act of being invisible by being very visible. Black SUVs with discreet flags, a lead motorbike whose rider wore annoyance like armor. The janitorial team polished the air itself. A violinist took up position by the fountain and played something designed to feel expensive. Collins, Mr. Voss again, the name like a door knocker. Where are we on the amenity cards? In the amenity baskets, she said, with the saffron dates and the almond cookies. She did not add. And the miswritten wishes. She had already swapped the cards destined for the Sheikh's suite with her own. Hand-lettered inserts she'd written in a small, precise script, idioms tuned to a grandmother's kitchen instead of a textbook's spine. You remembered to initial the service checklist? He asked. Yes, she said. He peered at the clipboard the way some men peer at babies, unsure of the protocol, ready to disapprove. And your uniform, he added almost kindly. The hem, a thread. She looked down. A loose line hung from the seam, a small undoing. She twisted it around her finger and tucked it under with a pin. Thank you, she said, and meant it. Correction is a kind of care when it doesn't want to be punishment. Yara's laugh pealed from the front desk like a bell that had heard gossip. She leaned toward the concierge and whispered something that made his eyebrows do a small dance. He's coming, she announced to anyone who hadn't asked. They just crossed the bridge. The lobby inhaled as one organism. The air cooled half a degree, the lights warmed half a shade, as if the room itself had blushed and then remembered its training. Staff took their marks the way actors take theirs, gliding to positions with the sort of energy reserved for royal weddings and corporate audits. Amamira retreated to the border of visibility, the spot by the column where she could see and hear without belonging to the scene. The doorman opened the doors with the ceremony of priests. The cameras blinked. The violinist hunted for reverent. Then the Sheikh arrived. He did not look like the magazine covers. Photographs flattened power into pose. In person, he was shorter, older, less airbrushed, and somehow larger. His eyes were not the eyes of a man who needs to be seen. They were the eyes of someone who knows his life has taught other people lessons they did not enjoy learning. The gutra folded at his crown was white as thread. The ogle lay black like punctuation. Behind him flowed the entourage, aides with phones, cousins whose jobs were unnamed, a retired general whose steps remembered cadence. The lobby seemed to think it could impress them, and to its credit, did not try very hard. Welcome, Your Excellency, Mr. Voss said, practicing genuflection with his mouth. We are honored. The Sheikh lifted a hand. It was not a dismissal. It was a small pause placed in the room like a finger on a page. He turned and spoke. To his aide first, then wider, the words unwinding in Arabic that had learned to breathe centuries ago. It was not the Arabic of television anchors. It carried dust and dates and long roads. It moved like water poured from a clay jar, deliberate, cool, shaped by the vessel. The staff, who knew marhaban and shukran as props, stiffened into smiles that didn't know where to go. Yara's eyes darted to the teleprompter of the mind and found only blank. The Sheikh's mouth twitched at one corner, not unkind. He continued, changing register, winding backward through time. The cadence of a market in Sana'a, the bite of a proverb from Hadramaut, a piece of poetry that had been old when steam was new. He created a labyrinth out of hospitality, and the people paid to welcome him lost their way by aisle 3. Laughter crept along the entourage, soft at first, then less soft, not cruel, complicit. A test had been offered. The room had declined to take it. Mr. Voss laughed too, the way people laugh when they hope laughter will translate to understanding. Beautiful, he said in English, as if flattery were a passport. The general behind the Sheikh did not laugh. He watched with the patience of a man who had stood at doors no one else knew existed. His gaze skimmed the staff, the marble, the chandelier, and paused at the column's shadow where a maid stood with her hands folded around a cloth. Amamira let the language move through her first, the way you let a storm blow through a field so the air can learn how to be air again. The vowels felt like water, The consonants lifted like birds startled from a branch and resettled in a row in her mouth. Her mother's voice lived under all of it, an old radio you never turn off entirely. She stepped forward. Not far, only enough that sound would not have to work to reach her. The hotel's training manual did not include this step. The manual did not know her. "Ahlan wa sahlan, yabna Sahara wal Bahar," she said, and the room changed temperature. "Welcome, son of desert and sea. Suqya lak, wali rafqatik, wali lughatik allati lam tughadir baytuha." Water to you and to your company and to your language which never left home. Silence fell cleanly, as if someone had pressed mute on marble. The cameras, suddenly useful, forgot to record. Mr. Voss's mouth opened and arranged itself around a protest that didn't know what words to borrow. The Sheikh's head turned, not quickly, but with that careful slowness reserved for thunderstorms and miracles. His eyes found the source of the sentence and held there. He did not smile. He did not perform surprise. He simply switched dialects as lightly as a man changes hands with a coin and said in a Hadrami cadence that had put men at ease around rough tables, "Salamun ala man araf al-ism wa huwa makhba'un fil hawa." Peace on the one who knew the name, even when it was hidden in the air. "Wassalamu ala man la yakhtabiru ad-duyuf illa liyukrimhum akthar," she replied. "And peace on the one who tests his guests only to honor them more." The general made a small, involuntary sound, a memory clicking into place. His eyes sharpened, then gentled, as if he had found a photograph he had once sworn he'd lost. Yara's smile curdled into a question. Mr. Voss swallowed a managerial syllable and found it too dry to be useful. The violinist's bow hung an inch above the string, terrified of playing wrong in a room that had suddenly remembered right. The Sheikh's mouth did something it had probably not done in months. It softened. He spoke again, a sliver of ancient verse folded into the sentence like saffron into milk. He was no longer testing the room. He was greeting one voice inside it. And from somewhere near the back, as if on cue from a script no one had written, a child brought by a diplomat's wife for photographs said in English, "The maid is talking to the king." "She's not talking," the older general murmured, half to himself and then, as if presenting a name to a table, "She is answering." The hotel's training manual had plenty to say about timing and temperature and the rate at which a smile should blossom across your face. It had nothing on what to do when a dialect older than your chandelier calls you to attention. The Sheikh regarded Amamira without blinking. Aides shifted like a flock, uncertain which way their leader would turn. Somewhere a camera remembered to be on, then thought better of it. The fountain kept pouring money-colored water. Time thinned. He spoke again, gently in the Arabic of palm groves and trade winds, vowels lifted by the Indian Ocean, consonants softened by 1,000 sailcloth whispers. "Min ayn laki hadha al-milhi ya bint?" "Where did you find this salt, girl?" Her hands were empty save for the cloth. She drew no breath for show. "Min khubz jaddati," she answered, the Hadrami cadence settling in her like an old shawl. "Woman al-bahri idha gharab, wa lam yajid man yartadir lah." From my grandmother's bread, and from the sea when it grows angry and finds no one to apologize to it. Aides covered grins with fists. The general's gaze did not leave her. He, more than the others, heard what wrote under the words. The pitch adjustment native to one village, the held consonant of a neighboring valley, the ornamental elongation you only learn if your teacher had a singer's ear. The Sheikh tilted his head, curious now, not predatory. He tested the boundaries the way you press the edge of a coin to feel its mint. He shifted again, northward, toward Sanaa's steep streets. Barter Arabic, market wit. Wallahi inna lisanaki laysa lisana khadimat al-funduk. By God, your tongue is not the tongue of a hotel maid. Al-lisanu li bayt man yukrimu, she replied before the room could decide between offense and flattery. A tongue belongs to the house that honors it. She let a proverb slip in behind the sentence like a hand on a child's shoulder. Woman ihtaqar al-qamh ja'a wa huwa fi as-suq. He who despises grain starves in the market. Laughter warmed, less sharp now. The general's eyes brightened the way old soldiers' eyes brighten when the right password arrives from an unexpected mouth. Mr. Voss's jaw clenched as if biting the word inappropriate would keep it from escaping. Yara's smile switched off and on twice, a faulty neon. The Sheikh's mouth framed a half-verse. stopped, changed his mind, and dove centuries deeper. He reached for a dialect the manuals call classical, only because they have no better word for something that refuses to age. He recited a line older than his nation, older than the carpet pattern under his boots, the opening of a pre-Islamic ode whose weight had set the rhythm for Arabic itself. The rhymes fell like stones dropped into an old well. Kifa nabki min dhikra habib wa menzel, he began, and the lobby's edges frayed, time sneaking a hand through. She did not answer with imitation. Echo is a parlor trick, she answered with reply, the way that poem taught its children to do. وَنُصْبِرُ قَلْبًا لَا يُرِيدُ تَصَبُّرًا, and we will teach a heart that does not want to, how to endure. Not canon, hers. Yet it rhymed where it should, breathed where it must, and bowed where etiquette required. The general's hand closed around air. For a quick, naked second, his face showed everything. Recognition, relief, grief. Behind the desk, the concierge made a sound that was almost a sob and turned it into a cough. The violinist, untrusting of his own arms, lowered his bow until it kissed the marble. She's memorized some phrases, Yara murmured toward Mr. Voss, a last desperate offer of normalcy. You know how YouTube is. Enough, Mr. Voss hissed in that particular register of hospitality where fear dresses up as control. He stepped forward, collecting authority with his arms. Your Excellency, forgive our staff. Collins is not a spokesperson. Clearly, the Sheikh said in prim English now, accent like a gentleman who once decided he would wear the language as a suit he might pawn later. His eyes did not leave Amamira. Yet the voice already spoke. Power shifted in the room the way water shifts when a boat turns. The level rises on one side, sinks on the other. Aides who had been amused were now attentive. A cousin let his mouth close so his ears could work. The general took a measured pace forward, the limp from some old story barely audible, and said the first words he'd offered since entering. Sidi, he said to the Sheikh, honorific, low and taut, Is'alha bisawahil. Ask her in the coast. The Sheikh obliged, turning the Arabic again, sweeping it east, south, along the littoral where Arabic had married Swahili and Portuguese and Gujarati, and raised children who spoke all three at once. Ala tutar bil asma' min kathrati ma nuhammiluha? He asked. Do names not tire of all we load onto them? She surprised even him with her answer. She did not simply follow him to the water. She got there ahead. Al asma'u qawarib, she said softly. Tahmil hatta tafhamna. Thumma nanzil wa namshi. Names are boats. They carry until they understand us, and then we disembark and walk. The general closed his eyes as if to reset the world to a version where such sentences were more common. When he opened them, discipline had returned. He turned to Mr. Voss. Do you know who is speaking in your lobby? He asked in English honed by decades of briefings. Mr. Voss found sanctuary in ignorance. A staff member, he said, who is currently compromised by nerves. By memory, the general corrected. Yara leaned over her desk. Mira, she said, bright and brittle, back to work. She meant back to place. Let management handle culture. Aides, smelling the familiar blood of internal hierarchy, began their murmurs. One, eager to prove a use, whispered to another, she must be from the Sheikh's province. A distant relation? A plant for a PR moment? The general's eyes flicked to the whisperer. She is not a plant, he said dryly. She is rain. The Sheikh raised a hand again, and the lobby obeyed. He spoke once more, this time to the part of Arabic that drifts like incense through family houses at dusk. He offered not a riddle but a lullaby, a South Arabian cradle rhyme about goats in the moon that you only know if your mother sang it to you before she taught you letters. It is the sort of song that cannot be faked without shame. Amamira did not sing. She spoke it, the way you say a prayer you are not sure you're ready to mean. The consonants were small and round and clean. When she reached the little nonsense syllables mothers add when their children invent them, she did not invent the wrong ones. The lobby's air loosened into something that remembered humbleness. Yara's eyes, traitors, glossed. The pastry chef passing the doorway with his sugar falcon slowed as if the sugar itself had recalled a kitchen, where sweetness was made of simpler things. The lullaby ended without applause. The best rooms do not clap for truth. They make room for it. It was the executive who broke it. The tallest of the aides, jaw engineered for cameras, ambition oiled and newly aggrieved. Enough theatrics, he said in a brisk Gulf English that grated like new money. He stepped between Amamira and the Sheikh, as if intercepting a ball. Excellency, we have meetings. We do not need a maid performing dialects to impress your nostalgia. The general did not move. He did not need to. The look he gave the executive contained a veteran's entire thesis on the cost of arrogance. The Sheikh's eyes cooled the temperature by 2 degrees. The aide mistook it for air conditioning. Sir, Mr. Voss chimed in, smelling an ally in the familiar shape of hierarchy. I agree. This is not appropriate. Collins, back of house. Now. Stop, the Sheikh said without volume. It was more effective than a shout. He let the command sit in English. Then he turned finally, fully, to Mr. Voss. You will not dismiss a person who has greeted me correctly in the language my grandmother died with in her mouth. He returned to Arabic for the last phrase because there are losses English does not carry well. Mr. Voss's hands opened in a gesture that was meant to look like surrender and look like calculation. As you wish, Your Excellency, he said, already writing the incident report in his head. The general took another careful step toward Amamira. He studied her face now, for Mark's memory could not counterfeit. The way people from certain roads turn their koyef to a soft G when they are sad. The shifted rhythm on the word for date palm that only shows up if you have climbed one. He found them where he needed them to be. He lowered his voice so that only she and the Sheikh could hear. Cedra? He asked, the word falling between them like a leaf. Cedra, the cedar tree. She did not look at him when she answered. Her gaze stayed on the expanse of marble in front of the Sheikh's sandals, respectful as a paved prayer. Naam, she said. Yes. Walakin la tunadini biha huna. But do not call me that here. The general's breath caught. He had expected recognition. He had not expected to be instructed again. And so gently. The Sheikh's eyelids lowered briefly, the way men's eyes do when they are both amused and moved. We will not, he said. Yara's nails worried the edge of her keyboard. Mira, she tried again, smaller now. What are you doing? What she was hired to, the general said, not unkindly. She is welcoming a guest. Mr. Voss regrouped. If he could not own the moment, he could at least brand it. Shall we proceed to the royal suite? He offered. We have prepared the Hadrami amenity, saffron dates. He emphasized Hadrami as if he owned it. The cards are wrong, the Sheikh said, still in English, to save Mr. Voss the humiliation of missing it in Arabic. He did not look at Voss. He looked at the column where the plaque she had polished gleamed like a coin that had finally decided to be true. But someone corrected the words that mattered. He turned back to Amamira. Come, he said, not in command but in invitation. Walk with us. Mr. Voss inhaled in horror. Staff did not walk with us. Staff glided parallel at a respectful distance and made themselves available for blame. Yara's eyebrows climbed over the wall of her professionalism and looked for anything to hold on to. I have dessert forks to align, Amamira said, the truth of the lobby calling her back even as something in her blood took a step forward. And a hall that depends on small angles. You have a country that depends on smaller ones, the general said softly. The Sheikh waited. He did not persuade. He does not persuade. Men like that do not. He offered a door. The room wondered whether the maid would recognize it. She took one step, not all the way, just enough. I will bring the amenity to your suite, she said to Yara, not asking permission. The right cards. She lifted her eyes to the Sheikh's for the first time fully. Wasa asir bibut. And I will walk slowly. The Sheikh's mouth made that half shape again, that meant approval without performance. Nahnu al waqt, he said. We are on time. As the entourage moved, people made space not out of awe, but because the choreography demanded a path. The executive tried to slide in front of the Sheikh again and found the general's shoulder accidentally exactly where his needed to be not. Mr. Voss murmured policy to himself until it sounded like prayer. Yara watched Amamira's back as one watches a word leaving a sentence that will read differently forever. The violinist, not trusting his own competence, chose silence over wrong music. It was the right choice. The fountain kept pouring what it had been told to. The plaque gleamed with its new old truth. And under the chandelier that pretended to be constellations, a maid answered, and the room learned how to listen. The corridor to the royal suite had learned to impersonate discretion. Carpets hushed footfalls into conspiracies. Sconces faked moonlight without daring to be romantic. A line of staff trailed the entourage like punctuation, useful only if placed correctly. Amamira walked 2 paces behind and 1 to the side of the sheikh, close enough to hear the language he kept for himself, far enough to remain technically invisible. Yara followed at a distance calculated to appear supervisory rather than curious. Mr. Voss drifted in and out of the procession like a man trying to be seen by security cameras only when he looked confident. The executive aide angled his phone as if the lens might confer legitimacy. The retired general kept an old soldier's cadence that had nothing to do with march and everything to do with memory. "Do you always carry a cloth?" the general asked in Arabic, voice pitched for 2. "Everything I touch expects to be improved," she said. "It's a superstition. Useful ones are called habits," he replied. The suite door opened to a room that had mistaken price for grandeur. The sea posed through glass, blue of a color consultants call assurance. A fruit bowl was arranged to suggest abundance without the risk of ripening. On a sideboard, the amenity baskets waited. Dates like polished coins, almonds sugared into obedience, and the hotel's professionally miswritten greeting cards seated on a silver easel with its error shining. Before anyone could notice, Yara reached to reclaim the card. "I'll just leave it," the sheikh said lightly. "It is good to be reminded who does not know our name." Yara obeyed, then placed Amamira's hand-lettered inserts beside the official one, as if creating an exhibit on the difference between sound and meaning. Her fingers trembled once, only the silverware noticed. The executive aide launched into logistics. "Excellency, the press conference at noon, BBC Arabic, Al-Majala, the usual wire services. Then the philanthropic luncheon. In the evening, later," the sheikh said. His eyes were on the smaller card. He read it, lips still, mind visible, and the corners of his mouth accepted something. "My grandmother said this," he murmured in Hadrami. "Don't promise a guest the river. Bring him a cup he can hold." "That is why the cups are small," Amamira said. The general drifted toward the balcony doors and pulled them open. The air stepped in, salted and unashamed, carrying the sound of gulls who had never heard the phrase 5-star. He stood there as men of his era stand in doorways to make rooms feel guarded. Then he turned and, as casually as he could manage while his heart prepared to change shape, asked, "Do they still call you Sidra anywhere? Cedar?" It was a humble nickname in other contexts, a tree that outlives its architects. In a certain underused hallway of the world, it was a code name whispered at checkpoints. Amamira didn't look at him. She adjusted the dates so the kala sat on top, the ajwa supporting them like cousins. "Names are boats," she said, reminding him of her rule. "They carry what you load. We should be careful what we ask them to ferry." The general smiled with what was left of his boyhood. "Then I have loaded mine with gratitude for a decade," he said. "It has not sunk." Mr. Voss, who had positioned himself near the espresso machine to look purposeful, cleared his throat in English. "Is there anything else housekeeping can do to make the suite?" "Quieter," the sheikh said, still in Arabic, "so we can hear the past if it knocks." The entourage learned to become furniture. Even the executive aide, sensitive to the temperature of attention, stepped back a pace. The general took a breath you could fold a map around and began in a register that smelled of frankincense and paperwork. "Once in Ankara," he said, naming the border city like men name a city they owe and resent, "we sat across from a room of men who hated each other perfectly. A translator kept them from finding new reasons. She carried a proverb from one to the other, and it arrived intact. When she asked for tea, both sides stood. "I am sure she was well paid," Mr. Voss said dryly, eyebrows up for permission to join the anecdote. "She asked for a bus ticket and a grilled sardine," the general said. "I told her to take a medal. She said medals are heavy and sardines do not keep." He faced the sheikh. "Sidra," he said, honoring the leaf despite her preference. It was her voice. The sheikh did not ask for proof. He liked evidence, but did not confuse it with conviction. Instead, he slid sideways into a language that demanded more than vocabulary. "Itarifin logat al-mahra?" he asked. "Do you know Mary?" Not Arabic, but her old cousin, alive on the tongues of camel routes and droughts. Yara glanced toward Google Translate in muscle memory and encountered only fear. Mr. Voss attempted a conversational smile and found it lacked hinges. Mary moves like a dune, deciding to be a sentence. It refuses to be tamed by rules invented in cities. Even scholars fake it. In the suite's salted air, the Sheikh offered a basic greeting in it and then a simple question. Two stepping stones over a stream most people mistake for dessert. Amamira listened the way sailors listen for a change in the wind. Then, without flourish, she answered. Not perfect, perfection is a liar, but with the intimacy of someone who'd eaten bread where those syllables were baked. The consonants clicked like coarse beads. The vowels stretched luxuriously where only that language stretches them. She put a little smile in the verb, the way Mary mothers do when they ask a child if he has eaten. The general's eyes filled before he could forbid them. He coughed and looked away at the sea, as if scolding waves could keep a face from betraying rank. The Sheikh, pleased like a teacher whose student had improved the lesson, tried a harsher test. Sokatri, more choral than sand, the island's own stubborn music. He asked for water with the respect islanders teach into that request. She returned him not water but a saying, "If you drink together, the island will remember your footprints." Her Sokatri was gentled by Hadrami edges, but recognizable enough to bring the island into the room. Even the executive aide lowered his phone. The sound of something older than oil had arrived uninvited and sat down on the coffee table. Yara forgot to be an employee and became a listener. "What is that?" she whispered, English unable to carry awe elegantly. "Home," the general said. The Sheikh was not done. He angled to Swahili, not as colonizers' import, but as the language that had traded secrets with Hadramaut long before passports. "Habari za asubuhi?" "Good morning." "Njema kama unavyoheshimu mgeni," she returned without thinking. "As good as you honor the guest." Then she tucked the Swahili back into the Arabic. "Kama kala jadi, mgeni ni zawadi." As my grandfather said, the guest is a gift. It was not about showing off. It was about stitching a coat she carried inside her. "What is this? A variety show?" the executive scoffed, volume attempting to erase insignificance. The general looked at him with pity, usually reserved for expensive dogs. "This is a door," he said. "Some of us are discovering we do not fit." Yara put a hand on the back of a chair to steady herself. "Mira," she said, a nickname that now sounded too small. "Why are you here?" "Because the plaque in the lobby is wrong," she said, as if that answered everything. It did to her. On the sideboard sat a bowl of raisins. She took one, rolled it between her fingers, and set it back. "Dates and raisins are cousins," she said to no one in particular. "One is patience, one is memory. They make you say different truths." "Sing us one," the Sheikh said, and for the first time his voice had play in it. He did not mean a staged aria. He meant the thing women do when men go to talk and houses need to remain homes. She thought of refusal. Then she thought of a kitchen tiled in turquoise, where a woman's hands taught a girl how to bind sound to breath. She chose a folk song that lives halfway between Yemen and Oman, the one old women hum when the bread must rise even after a death. She did not sing with ranges. She sang with the economy of someone who has never mistaken volume for prayer. The first line climbed like smoke from a clay oven. It asked the house to be brave. The second line dropped its weight into the floor and asked the mother to forgive tomorrow. The third settled on the windowsill and asked the wind to come back with news. There was a nonsense syllable in the fourth that every family makes differently. She chose the one her mother had invented, a soft ho-lay that only made sense if you remembered a baby who could not say hello yet. The suite did not applaud. The sea adjusted its breathing to match. The general stood very still, as if any movement might scare the song back into the corner of a decade. When it ended, he said, in English for those who could not be trusted with anything else, "This is Sidra Alugat, cedar of tongues." He said it like confession. Once she stopped a war with a proverb. Then she declined a salary that would have taught a banker humility. Then she disappeared. Mr. Voss, who had built a palace of policy inside his head and invited himself to live there, found this intolerable. "That is a charming story," as he said. "We are a hotel, not a UNESCO symposium. Collins, your tasks?" "Done," she said, nodding toward the forks he couldn't see. "Your hall is straight." The sheikh rested one hand on the back of a chair. It was a casual posture that had governed oil fields and elections. "You vanished," he said to her. "Why?" "Because my brother did," she said. The sentence lay between them without pity, like a tool you place on a table because someone asked what it weighs. The general closed his eyes. "Ancora," he guessed. "Earlier," she said. "Earlier than the part you can help with." The sheikh did not say, "I am sorry." Men like him learn quickly which words people have already exhausted. Instead, he asked, "And now?" "Now I polish plaques that call dignity by the wrong name," she said, "and sometimes I fix them." The executive made a noise like a chair being dragged. "We are late," he asserted, gesturing at his schedule as if it were geography. The sheikh ignored him with the ease of a man born to ignore lesser angels. He looked at the card again, at the handwriting that had refused to touch arrogance. "I have a room in Geneva in 3 days," he said. "Men will try to be clever there. The kind of clever that costs children their names. We talk about water, but we will be buying time. Come carry a proverb." "I have a shift," she said, "and a hall." "I have a plane," he said mildly. "It will wait." Yara stared at her hands as if they might translate her fate. Mr. Voss ran inventory of threats he knew how to make, and found none of them large enough for a woman who answered lullabies. The general stayed exactly where he was, as if not moving would keep the door open. "Why me?" she asked the sheikh, genuine in its bewilderment. "There are others, younger, with fresh passports." "Because you talked to my grandmother," he said, "and she has been dead 10 years. Silence set the table. The sea poured another line of white onto the sand and took it back. Amamira bit the inside of her cheek, the way she did when numbers needed balancing without a page. "I will bring tea to your press conference," she said at last, "and I will think while you say clever things." She looked at the general. "Do not call me Sidra there." "Never in front of cameras," he promised. "Only in rooms that know how to keep a name." She inclined her head, a bow small enough to survive the trip back to housekeeping. Then she lifted the wrong card off the silver easel and set it beneath her own, not to erase it, but to teach it where to stand. When she reached the door, Yara intercepted her with a whisper that had failed at envy and ended as awe. "Why didn't you tell us?" "You don't hire people to know their stories," she said, not cruel. "You hire hands that don't shake." "Yours did," Yara said. "Only once," she replied, and walked back into a hotel that would never be the same lobby again. The hotel's air conditioning sighed as if exhausted by its own luxury. Amamira's shift ended an hour ago, yet she was still in the staff hallway, seated on a folding chair with her apron in her lap like a confession. The fluorescent light above her flickered in the rhythm of decisions. On, off, almost, again. Her badge was clipped to her pocket, but the photograph, a younger version of herself, looked like it was trying to leave. Yara leaned against the opposite wall, arms crossed, makeup half removed. "They're saying the sheikh asked for you personally tomorrow," she said, voice half jealous, half afraid. "He asked for tea," Amamira corrected. "I happen to be the one who knows how to pour it without drowning the saucer." Yara's laugh was short, brittle. "Right. And I suppose the general asked for a lesson in dialects because he misses school." "Don't be cruel," Amamira said softly. "It doesn't suit you." Yara flinched, not from tone but from how cleanly it landed. "They're talking about you in the back office," she continued. "Voss called it unauthorized guest interaction. He wants a written apology." Amamira smiled, a tired curve. "Then he'll have to teach me how to apologize for speaking." The corridor's clock hummed toward midnight. Most of the staff had gone, the chatter of uniforms replaced by the metallic drip of pipes behind the wall. A maintenance worker passed with a bucket of water and nodded at Amamira. She nodded back, the kind of acknowledgement shared by those who know the value of being invisible. When Yara left, muttering about sleep, Amamira stayed. The silence gave her room to open the small black phone she'd hidden under her apron. It wasn't connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. It didn't need to be. The only contact in it was saved as mother. Though her mother had been gone for 6 years, she scrolled through old messages written in a mixture of Arabic and English, small fragments of domestic love. Did you eat? Tell your brother not to forget the bread. When you feel afraid, speak softly to the sea. The last message was unread, dated the night her brother died. They said it's only a protest. Come home early. She had never deleted it. At dawn, the city's glass towers peeled themselves out of shadow. The Sheikh's convoy was scheduled to leave at noon for a private meeting, but by 8 o'clock the staff was already in motion. Polished shoes, pressed smiles, voices tuned for obedience. When Amamira entered through the service door, a ripple of attention followed her like a scent. Mr. Voss was waiting by the linen desk with the weary rage of a man forced to respect someone he could not control. Collins, he said, voice clipped. A word. She stopped, expression neutral. Sir. He gestured her into the back office, closed the door, and let the silence grow teeth. You're on thin ice, he began. That stunt yesterday, completely inappropriate. Speaking to a guest in a private dialect, inserting yourself into a reception, utterly against protocol. I was spoken to, she said. You were tested, he snapped. And instead of deferring to management, you performed. You turned an arrival into theater. She tilted her head. He seemed pleased with the show. Voss's smile was tight as a knot. This isn't about him. This is about us. We maintain boundaries. The Sheikh doesn't employ you. I do. No, she said quietly. You rent me. The words landed like glass breaking underwater. No noise, just pressure. He took a breath, recalibrated his authority. You're suspended from guest interaction until further notice. You'll handle storage inventory and keep away from the royal suite. Of course, she said, her tone professional, her eyes patient. May I sign the acknowledgement? He blinked. What acknowledgement? The one HR will need for suspension without cause, she said simply. I'll be sure to send them a copy. For a moment, his composure cracked. He had forgotten that quiet people could read policy. Fine, he muttered, waving her away. Just keep your head down. I always do, she said, and left before he realized what she meant. The general found her in the laundry an hour later. He stood in the doorway, impossibly dignified amid the smell of detergent and steam. The workers paused, eyes darting between him and her. Miss Collins, he said, using her false name like a secret handshake. You're difficult to find. I'm not hiding, she said. I'm working. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. The Sheikh leaves soon. He requested your company. Mr. Voss suspended me. The general smiled faintly. A man with no power always uses the smallest one he has. Amamira folded a towel, set it on the pile, and looked him in the eye. I'm not interested in being rescued, General. You misunderstand, he said. I'm not offering rescue. I'm offering relevance. He placed a small envelope on the counter. Inside, she glimpsed a plane ticket and a diplomatic clearance pass. Geneva, he said. You'll fly with us tomorrow morning. If you decline, it will be as if this conversation never happened. She hesitated. Why me? Surely your government has translators. We have plenty of translators, he said. What we lack is someone who knows which words shouldn't be translated. She smiled despite herself. That sounds like flattery. It's memory, he said softly. Some debts take the shape of invitations. He left before she could answer. The laundry room door swung shut behind him, sealing in the smell of starch and heat. That evening, the sea outside the staff dormitory was restless, dragging white foam across the breakwater, like hands searching for something lost. Amamira sat by the window, writing on hotel stationery. The first page read, To whoever finds this, but she tore it up. The second began for myself, and she kept that one. She wrote about noise, the kind that follows power and the kind that fills silence. She wrote about languages dying without funerals, about how words are buried when no one dares to speak them aloud. And she wrote briefly about her brother, how he had carried banners for peace and come home under one. When she stopped, the paper was damp from her hands. She folded it, slipped it into the pocket of her apron, and looked at the horizon until it was too dark to tell sea from sky. Morning returned with gold light and rumors. The Sheikh's motorcade waited at the private airstrip. Staff lined the drive in formal ranks. Mr. Voss hovered near the terminal, terrified of being noticed. The sheikh emerged from the car, robes immaculate, expression unreadable. The general walked beside him, speaking quietly. Then the sheikh stopped, turned toward the waiting employees and asked, "Where is the woman who corrected our words?" Voss stiffened. She's occupied in back-of-house duties, Your Excellency. But of course, any assistance you require—" "Bring her," the sheikh said. Voss's face blanched. He gestured frantically to a bellboy, who sprinted toward the service wing. Minutes later, Amamira appeared, breath steady, uniform flawless. The sheikh regarded her for a long moment. "Are you still polishing plaques, Amamira?" he asked in Arabic. "Until they stop lying," she replied. He smiled. "Good. You'll find a new one waiting in Geneva. The world's languages are fighting again, and we'll need someone who remembers peace." "I didn't agree to go," she said, though the paper in her apron pocket burned with knowing. "You don't have to," he said, "but the plane will wait as long as it takes for you to decide." The general met her eyes across the tarmac. He didn't nod. He didn't need to. The invitation was older than both of them. Amamira looked at the hotel once, the mirrored facade, the windows that reflected wealth instead of truth, and felt a weight lift. She stepped toward the plane. Mr. Voss called after her. "Collins, you're abandoning your post." She turned, the wind catching her hair. "No," she said, "I'm returning to it." And with that, she climbed the stairs, leaving the hotel behind to polish its own reflection. The engines roared, swallowing the last of her hesitation. As the plane lifted over the coastline, she glanced down at the city, its towers gleaming like teeth, and whispered a line her mother used to say, "Even silence has an accent." She closed her eyes. Somewhere ahead, Geneva waited, and with it, a language that could still be saved. The Swiss morning pretended to be simple. Gray light on the lake, a tram whispering past like a polite rumor, pigeons debating democracy near the jet d'eau. In a hotel room that smelled of new carpet and international neutrality, Amamira arranged 2 cups on a tray as if they might anchor the day. She had slept an hour, maybe 2, inside a fatigue that felt less like absence and more like sediment, the past settling, the present trying to flow over it without turning brown. Down the hall, men were dressing their sentences in diplomacy. The schedule said technical session, water allocation, as if water were a concept and not a river with a memory. The general had slipped a note under her door at dawn. "They will arrive ready to be offended. Bring small words." The sheikh had sent nothing. He trusted currents. She poured tea for herself and sat by the window. Geneva was a postcard with handwriting she could not quite make out. Beyond the glass, light changed tone without asking permission. She closed her eyes and let a different light rise. The color of Sana'a at afternoon, gold thinned with dust, the way alleys inhale when the call to prayer lifts. Her mother's kitchen had been tiled in turquoise, so bright the room kept its own sky. The radio on the counter was older than the roof and steadier. On some afternoons, when the market noise needed translating into patience, her mother turned the volume low and beat eggs for cake with the same rhythm she used to scold politicians. "Language," she would say, tapping the wooden spoon against the bowl, "is how we decide who we deserve to be." Her mother had learned Arabic by ear and patience, and everything else by necessity. She wore her hair like an apology to no one. From an early age, she taught her daughter the borders of words, then the ways to cross them without getting paper stamped. "Repeat after me," she'd say, and the girl would repeat, not because obedience lived in her bones, but because curiosity did. The girl grew a braid of tongues so gradually she didn't feel the weight, only the pull. Her brother came later, loud where she was listening. Sammy ran with a pack of boys who believed posters could unmake tanks. He wrote slogans with the fervor of someone who had not yet met compromise and didn't plan to. At night, he'd practice speeches into the rim of a glass to hear how conviction changed shape and echo. He loved their mother like oxygen and believed dignity could be legislated. "Teach me your secret," he'd ask his sister, head bent over a bowl of salted almonds. "How do you make a sentence behave?" "You don't," she'd say, flicking his ear with the soft cruelty of sisters. "You invite it to." He would try the word on his tongue until it felt like a promise. Invite. They were both too young to recognize that enemies accept invitations too. Years later, Before airports learned to fear shoes, before papers learned to accuse, she stood on a rooftop east of the Bab al-Yemen and translated between a man who ran on prayer and a man who ran on arithmetic. The prayer wanted the price of bread to obey mercy. The arithmetic wanted it to obey grain ships. She found a verb that could hold both and handed it across like a bowl. The men didn't thank her. They nodded at each other as if the other had finally become articulate. Below, car horns invented a chorus. Above, the call to prayer braided itself through birdsong. For a moment, the city exhaled correctly. She might have chosen a career in air-conditioned halls then. If not for the day, anger learned her brother's name. The march had been scheduled, permitted, supervised, sanitized, or so the committee swore. Someone printed shirts the color of watered pomegranate. Sammy wore his, with a grin large enough to house a country. Their mother said, "Be home before sundown." Sammy saluted, made a joke about curfews, kissed the top of his sister's head on a dare, and went to audition for history. The crowd moved like muscle under skin. 10,000 bodies pretending to be a single intention. Chance climbed scaffolding and found rhythm. She was not a marcher, she was a listener. She kept to the curb, taking notes on slogans for later, translating a particularly clumsy one in her head into something more precise. The air felt charged but not malicious. Then the street buckled under a noise no one had invited. A line of riot police, visors shining like denial, advanced one pace too far into the space between warning and harm. Tear gas is a language too. It tells you what you cannot do with your lungs. Someone threw a rock, then a dozen someones, then no one could swear the rock had been first. The chant lost its meter and gained teeth. Tension found its fuse. She saw Sammy climb the plinth of a statue to make his body tall enough for his words. She heard him call for calm and watched calm arrive. Late, winded, easily shoved aside by panic. She saw a canister arc, an elegant geometry of state carelessness, and watched it bounce, hiss, bloom. She saw a boy kick it away, misjudge wind. She saw a man with a blue scarf raise a hand and lower it at the wrong time. She saw how quickly a shape can change from citizen to crowd to problem to target. She saw the dull report of a weapon answer a rumor. She saw Sammy turn his head to say wait. After, she saw nothing useful, only a crowd learning to become a stampede, a city trying to teach itself erasure. She found him 3 blocks away, under a banner that no longer meant anything. There was more blood than a human body should be allowed to hold outside itself. His mouth tried to make a story and failed. She said his name twice. The first was a command, the second a plea. He obeyed neither. At the hospital, men who had been boys the day before dragged hoses across tile, as if cleanliness could bargain with outrage. Their mother arrived silent and left so slowly the air apologized. Someone said stray bullet, as if bullets were dogs with bad training. Someone else said unavoidable. She spent the night listening to machines pretend they had power. Her mother's radio finally fell silent. The kitchen tiles kept their sky for the living. In the morning, the city learned how to bury noise. The posters turned into cloth for wiping tables. The men returned to those air-conditioned rooms where bottles of water, where suit jackets, and talked about loss in numbers, tidy enough to fit in minutes. She left. Not because leaving was brave, but because staying would have required a new language, and she didn't trust anyone enough to teach it to her. She took a job in a place that believed cleanliness was a sacrament and anonymity a virtue. She ironed shirts until stories looked like creases you could press out. She held her mother in her head and her brother in the quiet between sighs. Geneva lifted her back toward the present with the sound of a church bell practicing restraint. The tray on her knee had cooled. She took a sip of tea that had become truth, bitter, then easier. On the table lay the general's note. She turned it over and wrote on the back, in a script her mother would have scolded for its economy. Small words. Water. Children. Tomorrow. Keep. The phone in the room rang with Swiss efficiency. She let it ring twice to remind it who it served, then answered. The general's voice was a low map. The Iraqi delegation added a lawyer, he said. The Yemeni technocrat brought an uncle. The translator from the institute is competent and convinced words are weapons. We begin in 40. And the Sheikh? Eating bread as if it were his first day of poverty, the general said, something like pride hidden under the joke. He asked if you were ready. I am, she said. It was not confidence. It was consent. The corridor outside smelled faintly of coffee that did not understand cardamom. She took the elevator down, watching numbers change without lying. In the lobby, security performed seriousness with earpieces and shoes that wanted to run. Banners told the world it was welcome as long as it behaved. A woman at the information desk mispronounced 3 countries and apologized with professional grace. Conference room B had glass walls and no secrets. Inside, a rectangle of men, and one woman with the posture of a verdict, arranged their papers like shields. Place cards with flags pretended borders were polite. The institute translator sat at the head of the second table, earbuds in, eyes bright, confidence sharpened like a pencil. He might have reminded her of her brother in another life, if he had less hunger and more mercy. The Sheikh entered without entourage, as if walking into a living room that needed dusting. The room stood. He nodded to each flag as if bowing to weather. When his eyes found her, they did not change. He had expected her to show up or not. He had never expected spectacle. That was why she said yes. The chair banged a gavel that thought it could shape time. We are here to discuss allocations under Scenario C, he announced in English that had loaned out its verbs once too often. The floor begins with technicals. He handed the mic to a hydrologist who carried his laser pointer like a wand. Graphs climbed and fell like children on playground equipment. Aquifers became arrows. Villages became dots inside boxes. The institute translator slid between languages with athletic grace, adding polish as if the words were pieces of furniture under his care. When a delegate spoke too quickly, he truncated, choosing the gist over the wound. When another fumbled, he improved. It sounded good. It smelled wrong. Language is a living thing. It resists embalming. She watched nuance suffocate politely under competence. In a corner of the graph, the word temporary wore a tie it should not have owned. The young translator made it transitional, because that sounded less like theft. A delegate said thirst, and the translator said shortage. A woman with the posture of a verdict used a proverb, and he replaced it with a statistic. It was not malice, it was a habit, civilization's most dangerous kind. The hydrologist clicked to a slide titled mitigation. The word arrived like a velvet rope. The Yemeni technocrat adjusted his glasses. The Iraqi lawyer smiled without teeth. The Sheikh waited the way a fisherman waits, eyes on the float, patience built by hunger. When the floor opened for questions, men spoke in paragraphs built to resist listening. She wrote on the general's note, "We are drowning in grammar." He huffed a quiet laugh, then coughed it into diplomacy. On the third exchange, when a map proposed renaming a river segment for the sake of clarity, she asked for the mic. Chairs dislike microphones in the hands of people not on the program. This chair liked order. He frowned. The general tilted his head. The Sheikh did not move. "I request a clarification," she said in impeccable French to buy herself time, then continued in Arabic so the right ancestors would hear. "When you say temporary intake, do you mean mutafa, borrowed, or muta'ada, habitual? One is a courtesy, the other is a precedent. We should decide which before we translate it." The institute translator hesitated for the first time all morning. He had learned every technical term and almost none of the tribal ones. He reached for mu'akata, temporary, and stopped. Heads lifted. The Yemeni technocrat looked at her properly, seeing a face instead of a role. The Iraqi lawyer narrowed his eyes as if a door had closed somewhere behind him. She kept her voice low, the way you speak to frightened animals and ministers. "Where I grew up," she said, "a well you drink from once is a kindness. A well you drink from twice is a promise. Which are we making?" Silence unclenched a hand and held it out. Somewhere behind her, a secretary's pen decided to start respecting margins. The Sheikh leaned forward a centimeter and let air back into the room. "Let us be precise," he said gently, now in English so the note-takers could keep their paychecks. "We request courtesy, not precedent." "Courtesy," repeated the chair, grateful for a word that could appear in minutes without starting a war. The map's legend changed color. The young translator corrected his glossary. The conversation reassembled with a better vertebrae. In the pause that followed, as men recalibrated the distance between maps and thirst, She saw her brother for a second, shirt the color of pomegranate, mouth open to make a country larger. She did not cry. She did not make that his memorial. She used the next sentence to teach the room a smaller word. She spoke twice more in the session, once to unbundle compensation from punishment, once to turn evaporation into loss so the farmers could sit in the same sentence as the dams. The general, who had cultivated a career on self-control, allowed himself one visible exhale. The sheikh listened like a man admitting he was being saved by something he had not paid for. When the gavel finally pretended to create afternoon, men stood and counted victories under their breath. The institute translator approached her with professional cordiality and a hint of affront. "Your interventions were helpful," he said, which is what professionals say when they mean disruptive but useful. "Where did you train?" "In kitchens," she said, "and in streets." "You?" His smile sharpened. "Cambridge." "Good school," she replied, not unkind. "They will teach you when to be quiet." He stiffened, then softened, youth choosing whether to be improved by a bruise. "Perhaps," he said. She stepped out into the corridor. Geneva's particular light had softened from gray to a pale yellow that made walls look as if they had been told a secret. The general joined her, hands behind his back, a posture borrowed from a lifetime of halls. "Tea?" he asked. "In a minute," she said. She leaned against the window and watched the lake hold sky without spilling it. "I remembered why I left," she murmured. "And why you came back," he said. She nodded. "Some debts take the shape of invitations. Some homecomings wear borrowed badges." She touched the edge of the note in her pocket. Small words: water, children, tomorrow, keep, and added silently, "Brother." Then she turned toward the room where men were already rehearsing tonight's speeches and chose again to be the hinge instead of the door. Chapter 6 of 7, about 1,142 words. By the second day, the conference hall smelled faintly of ambition and recycled air. Name tags bumped against suits, translators blinked through fatigue, and the microphones carried more ego than sound. Outside, Geneva glittered with polite weather. Inside, the negotiations had stalled on a single word: ownership. Ownership, like love, meant too many things to too many people. The lawyers wanted legal borders, the engineers wanted pipes, the politicians wanted headlines, the sheikh wanted justice that fit in a sentence. And Amamira, sitting at the side table with a notepad too small for history, wanted the word to behave. The morning session started with ceremony. The Yemeni technocrat adjusted his glasses and spoke first, voice careful and deliberate. "We do not seek to own the river," he said in Arabic, letting each word fall like a coin. "We seek only to drink from it without apology." The institute translator rendered it neatly into English. "We do not seek control of the resource, only fair access." The sheikh's eyebrow lifted half a centimeter. That was the problem with translation. It turned thirst into policy. He leaned toward the mic. "Fair access," he said, still in Arabic, "is a phrase invented by the full." Laughter rippled through the Arabic listeners, confusion through the English ones. The translator hesitated, searching for an equivalent that wouldn't ignite the room. "He means, fair access is subjective," he offered lamely. Amamira's pencil paused mid-word. She looked up, her instincts humming. Then she spoke, voice calm, measured, not loud but impossible to ignore. "Your Excellency means that fairness cannot exist without fullness," she said, switching deliberately to English so the record would catch it. "That those who have must understand hunger to speak of sharing." The sheikh turned his head slowly, meeting her eyes. His nod was small, but it traveled the entire room. "Exactly," he said. And just like that, the current changed. At lunch, she found herself alone in the atrium, a plate of bread and olives untouched before her. The general approached quietly, carrying 2 coffees. "You handled that well," he said, placing one in front of her. "The sheikh believes you have done this before." "I've done nothing," she said. "Words only buy us time." "Time is expensive," he said, "and you just made it cheaper." She smiled faintly. "You speak like a man who knows interest rates." He chuckled. "I know debts. You have become one to him." "To the sheikh?" "No," he said, glancing toward the tall glass wall where the lake shimmered like an oath. to history, and she collects with interest. The afternoon session promised technicalities but delivered politics. The Iraqi lawyer, weary of metaphors, pressed for measurable outcomes. Allocations require commitment, he said. Signatures, seals, and witnesses. We cannot rely on goodwill and poetry. Then you misunderstand poetry, the sheikh replied. Laughter again, uneven, nervous. Amamira whispered to the general, they are building a bridge out of mirrors. Better mirrors than smoke, he murmured back. But smoke was already curling between sentences. The institute translator stumbled again, turning ancestral rights into historic privileges. The air shifted, one word too many on the wrong side of pain. The Yemeni technocrat's tone sharpened. Privileges? My grandfather dug wells with his hands so yours could drink. The Iraqi lawyer slammed his folder shut. We are not our grandfathers. The room fractured into languages, voices overlapping, history shouting through every accent. The chair hammered his gavel. The microphones buzzed in protest. Then into the noise came a sound older than microphones. A single woman's voice, steady, precise. Stop. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Authority sometimes arrives as silence wearing a word. They stopped. Amamira stood slowly, her notebook still closed. We are forgetting the thing itself, she said. Water does not know borders. It does not need passports. It only asks, will you drink together or separately? The chair hesitated. Madam, you are not on the floor. She met his gaze. Neither is reason. The sheikh exhaled a sound that might have been approval. Let her speak, he said, and she did. She spoke of her brother without naming him, of the marches where men fought for the right to fill a jug without paying tribute. She spoke of women carrying water on their heads across checkpoints, the weight balanced by memory. She spoke of the desert, how it forgets insults faster than men do, and how it forgives only those who listen. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The words filled the room like a tide that refused to apologize for returning. When she finished, there was no applause. There was only the sound of translators repeating her sentences in different tongues, each one softer, humbled by the act of carrying them. The general's eyes glistened. The sheikh looked at her as if seeing a flag he hadn't known he'd lost. Even the young institute translator, his pride bruised but intact, took his headset off and listened without it. That night, Geneva draped itself in gold. The conference hall emptied into the cool hush of corridors and cars. The sheikh requested a private meeting with his delegation, and her. They gathered in the penthouse suite overlooking the lake. The room smelled faintly of mint tea and unsaid decisions. You changed the room, he said. Do you know what that costs? I didn't mean to, she said. I only wanted them to understand. Understanding is the most dangerous form of victory, he said. The general added softly. You reminded them that water has a memory. She looked between them. And now? Now, the sheikh said, they will either listen or remove the one who made them feel small. The general handed her a folded envelope. A message came for you. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, grainy, years old. Her brother laughing on a rooftop, a flag slung over his shoulder. On the back, a scrawled note. He didn't die for silence. She looked up sharply. Where did you get this? The sheikh's face softened. He worked for men I once trusted. He believed they would build something worth dying for. He was wrong. I was part of that wrong. The air between them stilled. She whispered, You knew him. I met him once, he said. He spoke like thunder in a jar. He told me you could translate lightning. Her throat closed. He said that? Yes, he smiled faintly. He was right. The general, standing by the window, cleared his throat. Tomorrow's session will write the draft. There will be pressure. They will want you silent. Then they'll be disappointed, she said. Good, he replied. Disappointment is the beginning of change. Later, she walked alone along the lake, coat wrapped tight against the cold. Lights from the shore rippled across the water like handwriting. Every ripple seemed to spell his name. She thought of her mother's radio, of words cooked into meals, of how language had been both their curse and their shelter. She wondered if peace was just another word waiting for someone brave enough to translate it correctly. Behind her, footsteps approached, measured, official. The general. You shouldn't be alone, he said. I've been alone longer than they've been powerful, she said. He nodded. Still, power hates witnesses. They stood in silence, watching the lake breathe. Tomorrow, he said quietly, they'll ask for signatures. Once the ink dries, men will call it progress. But it will only last if someone keeps reminding them what the words mean. I will, she said. I know, he said. That's why I'm afraid for you. She smiled faintly. Fear is just respect wearing armor. The wind shifted. The smell of rain came early. She looked up at the clouds. If my brother were here, he'd tell me not to be cautious. And you'd tell him to be careful. Always. They watched the first drop of rain hit the surface, then vanish into its reflection. Go rest, the general said. Tomorrow the world learns how much truth costs. As he walked away, she whispered a promise to the water. I will keep the words alive. The lake made no reply, only a ripple, soft and endless, as if bowing in return. The morning broke gray and silver, the lake as still as paper. From her hotel window, Amamira could see the flags outside the conference center, hanging limp, like they too were waiting for permission to breathe. Today was the signing day, the end of months of posturing and drafts and rewritten promises. The kind of day politicians love because it photographs well. Pens, cameras, smiles rehearsed in the mirror. But beneath it, the air tasted like iron. She dressed carefully. Plain navy suit, hair tied back. The badge clipped low so it wouldn't gleam. The general had said visibility is currency. Don't spend it all in one morning. She carried no notes. Her words lived in her pulse now. In the elevator, a pair of aides whispered nervously in French. She caught fragments, translations, tensions, mistakes. Their voices trembled around the word mistakes. She knew what that meant. Somewhere in the new agreement, someone had changed a term. When she entered the hall, the sound of shuffling papers hit her first. The chairs were arranged in perfect symmetry, 2 rows of nations facing one another across a long lacquered table. Bottled water glinted between nameplates, each one engraved with borders that had cost blood. The Sheikh stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, posture carved from patience. The general stood beside him, murmuring to a man in a navy suit. Mr. Voss, of all people, lingered near the back, brought perhaps as an observer for logistics. His eyes caught hers. There was caution there now, not contempt. Good morning, the Sheikh said, turning toward her. Did you sleep? Enough to remember what matters, she replied. Good, then we will begin. The chair opened with a string of pleasantries about progress and cooperation. The translators followed, their voices weaving a sterile harmony. Words like collaboration, mutual respect, and historic accord filled the air, heavy with optimism and omission. Then came the presentation of the final draft. 50 pages of elegant compromise. It had the look of peace but the soul of accounting. She listened, translating silently in her head. Most of it matched what they'd agreed. Most, but not all. When the Iraqi lawyer read Article 7 aloud, the line pricked her like a thorn under cloth. Temporary shared control of critical wells shall transition to designated regional stewardship upon review by an external council. It sounded harmless, almost bureaucratic. But to anyone who spoke the dialects of the South, the Arabic version, Tawil al-Siyada al-Mawqufa, meant something else. Transfer of suspended sovereignty, a loophole large enough to bury a people. Her breath caught. She looked to the Sheikh. He was still, but his eyes had hardened. He'd heard it too. The general's fingers tapped once against the table, a code of warning. Do not speak yet, but silence has a lifespan, and hers had already lived long enough. She rose. The microphones clicked on instinct, sensing disruption. I request clarification, she said evenly. The Arabic and English texts are no longer identical. The chair frowned. Madam, this session is for ratification, not revision. Then ratify truth, she said, because right now, it's missing from the page. Murmurs spread like brush fire. The translator from the Institute stiffened, scrolling through his notes. There is no error, he said quickly. The terms were harmonized overnight for legal precision. Harmonized, she repeated, voice sharp as light through glass. That's not harmony. That's deceit wearing grammar. Enough, the chair snapped. You are not a delegate. The Sheikh's voice came then, soft but so calm it made the air tremble. She is my delegate. The room stilled. Cameras turned. The translator froze mid-breath. The Sheikh took the microphone from its stand. Article 7, as written, enslaves the wells. It makes us tenants of our own water. That was not agreed. The Iraqi lawyer rose, defensive. Excellency, you merely erased dignity in the night. The Sheikh interrupted. Do not call that negotiation. The chair tried to regain control. Your Excellency, this language was reviewed by our legal counsel. Whose counsel? Amamira asked, stepping forward. Because no one who speaks with a mother's tongue would write it that way. She turned to the interpreter table. Read it aloud, she demanded. The Arabic version, line 37. The young translator hesitated. His eyes darted toward his supervisor. Read it, she said again. His lips parted. The words emerged haltingly, fragile, like paper catching fire. When he reached the phrase, transfer of suspended sovereignty, the meaning unfolded in the air for all to see. Every Arabic ear in the room went still. Every English speaker sensed the shift, but couldn't name it. That, she said, is not precision. That is theft with punctuation. The tension broke like storm glass. Delegates argued in overlapping waves. Lawyers scrambled. Aides whispered into phones. Journalists half rose from their seats. Amamira stood unmoving amid the noise, her hands flat on the table. She wasn't shaking. She had no anger left, only clarity. The general approached her side, speaking low. You've lit the match. It was already burning, she said. I just refused to pretend it was a candle. The Sheikh lifted a hand. Enough. The voices fell. He turned to the chair. We will not sign this document, not with that phrase. The chair swallowed hard. Revisions will delay ratification by months. The donors, let them wait, the Sheikh said. Water does not hurry for the thirsty who lie. For a long, fragile minute, no one moved. Then the general reached across the table, picked up his pen, and with deliberate calm drew a single black line through the offending sentence. It cut through the page like a river reclaiming its path. Rewrite it, he said. Properly this time. The chair stared at the line, then nodded once. So noted. It was done. Quietly, completely. Outside, the air tasted of rain and freedom. They stepped into the courtyard, the press waiting at a respectful distance, cameras hungry. The Sheikh paused at the steps, speaking to no one in particular. They will call this delay a failure, he said, but what we signed today was honesty, not paper. The general smiled faintly. Honesty leaks less. Amamira stood a few paces away, watching the clouds gather over the lake. It won't hold forever, she said softly. They'll change the words again someday. Yes, the Sheikh replied, but now they know we are listening. He looked at her, eyes gentle. You have done more than I asked. You gave the water its own voice. She shook her head. It already had one. You just heard it this time. The general placed a hand on her shoulder. You could stay, he said. Work with us. The Sheikh will need advisors who remember what truth sounds like. She looked toward the horizon. No, I think I'll go home. Home? Wherever the words need cleaning. The Sheikh chuckled softly. A maid's calling never ends. She smiled. Nor does dust. That evening, she walked alone down to the lake shore. The water lapped quietly at the stones, reflecting the sky's reluctant light. She knelt, cupped a handful, and tasted it. It was cold, pure, alive. She whispered in Arabic, almost a prayer. For every tongue that thirsts. Somewhere, she could almost hear her brother laughing, the way he used to when she'd scold him for his recklessness. Invite it, he'd say. Even storms need translators. She stood, letting the breeze tug at her hair, the rain just beginning to fall. Behind her, the conference building glowed with artificial peace. Ahead, the lake stretched like an unfinished sentence. She began to walk, the hem of her coat catching droplets, her steps steady. She did not look back. The world would rewrite itself again tomorrow, and she would be there to correct it.